Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started this morning. Welcome, welcome. Any questions that you had from yesterday or things that you wanted us to retouch on or re-go over? Our goal today, and we're not going to jump right into it, we're going to kind of ease into it, but we're going to talk more and more about customers, and I might pick on both Dan and Santiago a little bit to kind of like how you guys kind of use some of the CRM functionality, kind of that kind of stuff. And then also I'm going to pick on Steve a little bit, kind of just talk a little bit about POs, but our general focus today is going to be customers, e-commerce, elements of time, and FlexGrid, okay? Those are kind of going to be general themes that we're going to be talking about, and don't worry, we'll introduce them as we kind of get closer and closer to them, okay? So everybody, yes, Dan?
Quick question, could you give me the
Yep.
sign-in codes? I got a new computer today, so.
No problem. So there's the sign-in code. It's Moose21 and then Joni7.
Okay.
Awesome. So Steve, you ready to kind of take us on a small review slash whatever? Once again, as he's going, if you have questions, holler, okay?
Did you get signed in, Dan? Or you need that back up there?
I did get in, but it's saying it's not correct. I'm typing it.
It's all lowercase.
There's two ends. I had a hard time logging in this, but
That's because mine's not capitalized.
Yeah, it makes a little bit of a difference.
You want to change your screen size setting so it's like,
Okay, so what Brandon wants me to kind of review is just kind of a general overview of what we touched on yesterday. And I thought we would start with adding a PO with vendors as, you know, services, just a quick one. So the way that I usually typically start a setup to either add items into the system or add services is I usually start right here in the quick search. I click on the vendor, and then I'm going to just type in this corporation that we're working in is the Denver Training. So I'll just type in a little bit of Denver, and that one hadn't been added because Brandon actually had added generic. Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to add a new vendor, and so I'll just call this one Denver Training. And if I don't know the address, I can put in need. I can get to that, come back and put that in. If I don't know the zip, I can put in 5 zeros in there. Add the payee. One thing I do want to mention to you about vendors, and this is just kind of taking a little bit of a sidestep, but you'll notice on this vendor field there isn't anywhere in here where I could add like an additional contact information. So like a lot of companies, they deal with vendors, they know who the sales rep is or they know who the account manager is at the company that they deal with. That's where once Brandon goes into FlexGrid, that's what FlexGrid is going to help you cover. So you can set up a FlexGrid field for vendors that says, hey, who's my account manager, who's my additional contact at this company. Okay, so and that also gives you 15 additional fields if you need more information than these fields here. You may want to track. That's what FlexGrid is going to do. So that's kind of a precursor to what's coming with FlexGrid. But anyway, I've got my vendor set up, Denver Training. I'm going to go ahead and create a new PO for that. And on the PO types, I'm going to select Basic Live. And there's 5 other types on POs, and that's kind of another session that, at some point we need to get into because that starts covering light manufacturing, internal builds, and things of that nature.
Mixed vendors, all kinds of stuff.
Mixed vendors. Basic Live is one that you will probably use the most in most business practices. I'm going to choose a location. And in the notes, I'm just going to put in here set up services. And PO amount, I can put in 0 or leave it. And vendor invoice, I like to put in setup in there. That's personal preference.
Unless you have like a real number. If you have a real number from the vendor, you want to put that in there because then it's then searchable.
And then we're going to add the PO. Once the PO is added, the default is that the cursor is flashing in this add item by searching services. And you can also see down below here, we don't have any line items yet. The services or the items that you're going to add to the PO will display down below here. So I'm going to put in bookkeeping. And once it finds or searches for book, it shows that we don't have it underneath that vendor because obviously it's a brand new vendor. So we're going to add the item, and I'll just call it bookkeeping. And because it's a service, I want to select special service, unlimited inventory. And then category, I see you guys now have some categories additionally in here. So I'll just put this one under, I don't really see, well, services. So there we go. And then I'll just put in a description of this.
Gotta love typing on a laptop, huh?
Yeah, reference number, that's an additional lookup. I could put something in there if I wanted or not. Sometimes you can put a symbol in there, like if I put that ENYE symbol in there, so on all the items that I'm setting up, if I put the ENYE symbol in there, when I'm in the shopping cart, if I just type in the ENYE symbol, it'll just give me all 5 or 6 of those items that have that in reference number. And that's one thing that I use sometimes with clients where, let's say for instance that they have 2,000 items in their inventory and they ask me a question, they're like, how could I mark stuff in my inventory that I want to close out and get rid of? And I say, yeah, go in the reference number and put the @ sign in there or put the ENYE sign, put something in there that probably none of your other items have in the description or the name field. And then you can create a button that will go search for that piece, and your salespeople could touch the button or search for like ENYE, and it will return back to you all the closeout items you have. Does that kind of make sense? So that's just kind of another use that I found that's very helpful for reference number. Sale price, I'm just going to say we're charging $55 and it's per hour for bookkeeping time, and I'm going to say it's labor, and I'm not going to use any of these other fields. By the way, just so you know, the barcode fields, you can put the ENYE symbol in there, or you can put it in the RFID tag, because when someone searches through the shopping cart for an item, it's searching RFID, barcode, it searches the reference field, it searches the description, and it searches the part number. So it's hitting all those fields, so you can use those fields to kind of mix and match what you're trying to accomplish. On the barcode, if I wanted to, I could type in auto, and the system was automatically going to generate a barcode number for that. And it's a unique number in the fact that, as you can see up here, the ID number here is new. It's going to generate an ID number, automatically generate an ID number. So I'm going to get the next ID number, and then that same number is going to be generated down here in the barcode field. So once I add it, if I go back, scroll down, you can see I added part number here, and you can see now it has this little BC by the label, which means barcode. So I've just added that. If I wanted to take a look at this, actually let me add one more item. I'm going to hit my back button, and I'm going to come up and I'm going to add, let's add consulting.
Just so you know, if you are using your back button and you're trying to trick it, if it finds the same exact part number with the same vendor, it'll squawk at you. Sorry, it's already in there. So you're not going to overwrite your other pieces.
So I'm going to add consulting. I just change the consulting, and then I do the copy paste. So I just copy and paste it, add the part number. Again, your back button is your best friend or your worst enemy, because if you hit your back button, you're going to add a new item. And that's nice when you're like adding items like this, especially when you're setting up an account with a client that has a lot of services, or they're setting up a new vendor that has a lot of items. The other thing to remember too, if you have a client that has a numerous amount of items, like Brandon's uploaded up to 200,000 items for clients. So, you know, usually what we do, if it gets into the thousands, then it's cheaper for them to just pay Brandon a couple $100 to send the list, and then Brandon can push all those up to whatever the vendor name is, so it's all set in there.
200,000 for one client?
We've had clients that have had over 200,000 items. Yeah. So it gets out there. I would say your average client is usually somewhere in the 5 to 10,000 if they're selling a lot, if they've got kind of a retail establishment. But you get into some that they just have
They went back in time.
tremendous amount. True, yeah, and it depends. It also depends too on how many vendors that they have, and also if they're using what's called homogeneous inventory, which that kind of gets into the scope of some of the other PO types that we have. So just kind of briefly on homogeneous inventory, the best example I could probably give you would be like a liquor store, where you would not set up every vendor that the liquor store buys from, because they're buying from distributors. And so what we do is we set up all the items, and they typically would have anywhere from like 5,000 to 10,000 items, depending on the size. And all of those items are normally set up underneath the business name. So if it's XYZ liquor store, you would set all the items up under there, and then they buy from all these different distributors that they buy from. And then on top of that, you even have the manufacturer. So sometimes you can set up all the items under the manufacturer, and then that way it's tracking from which vendor they purchased it last and the last known cost on that vendor. And then you get a listing of, when you're switching vendors. The other example of that too is like a bakery. Say they're buying sugar, you would set sugar up underneath as a homogeneous. In other words, sugar's only in there one time, whether you're buying it from Sam's, Costco, Safeway, whatever vendor that you're going to buy that sugar from. That way you don't have sugar in there 15 different times. That's the homogeneous inventory, and our system controls that and tracks that in that manner. So here's the PO that I have. I have two services, bookkeeping and consulting. If I want to drill down to like bookkeeping, I can click on the service name. And the display here will show the name, the part number. Notice that you can also click on part number again if you have the permission. That allows you to go in and edit. Here's the barcode that was generated, the number that was generated, and you notice that the part ID up here is the same. So we just basically have the part ID duplicated down here, but then that'll take you to your barcode generator. And you can also get the barcode generator right off of the PO. Seems like our internet's just a little slow here this morning. Anyway, here's the barcode, and then if I go back to the PO by using my little internet here, or my little super back button, so to speak, I can jump back to the PO page. And so here's our two items that are on the PO. And the only other thing that you could potentially want to do with a PO is to verify the PO. I don't know if we talked about that yesterday, but the PO has a verification process, and I believe, Joe, you were asking a question to Roxanne about these little lock buttons here. So the reason that there's another step there, if you so choose to have that step, is because we do have a lot of companies, and when we personally set this up for our own use, we had locations that were removed from the accounting office. So the process, because we're trying to emulate exactly what happens physically, is the process goes like this. If you have a location or a off-site location that's receiving inventory, they can set up a PO and a request mode prior so that you can give the vendor a PO number. Like if I was actually ordering these items from Denver Training, I could call them up and say, hey, I need to order this much of this and this much of this, and I could say, by the way, it's PO number 14. So most businesses, when they call and place orders with their suppliers, their supplier will ask, do you have a PO number? And so you can give them the PO number. The difference is that the PO would be what we call in a request mode, where it's like, hey, I haven't received the items yet. Allows you to request how many items, and then when the inventory arrives, then you can go back to the PO, and you can actually put in, oh, I ordered 15, but they back ordered 5. I'm going to receive 10. And you can receive exactly what's on to the PO, or what exactly is on the invoice that you're receiving from that manufacturer or vendor, and you can match up to this PO. Then what happens, then the process goes like this. Well, the next thing that happens with a PO is it needs to be paid. So these little lock buttons here are controlled also off of either manually. So like, let's just say I only receive the bookkeeping. I'd say, okay, I'm still kind of receiving this. This is like, I locked one line item down because I received that. I'm still waiting for the next shipment to come in or whatever. There's all these variables that happen. But once the PO is completely received, you can go to verify and just click on the verify PO and verify. So what that does is that locks these other buttons, and that also sets it up in the payables where it not only displays itself in the payables, it also is ready to be paid. So it's kind of like a little timestamp or a little stamp, if you will. Say, for instance, you have a location in Dallas and they just received a shipment. They don't have to call the accounting office 3 states over and say, yeah, go ahead and pay for that. I did receive that merchandise. This is a communication tool between off-site receiving headquarters and accounting headquarters and letting them know, go ahead and pay the bill. So that's what the verify does, is it verifies the PO, locks it down, additionally sets it in the payables. Prior to me verifying this, if I went to payables, you would see a little grayed out box where they couldn't quite click in the box to write the check. This way the box is open now and they can click in and write the check. So there's a lot of interface between different departments that we have with clients. So just got them an FYI. Your normal mom and pop's place, it's more of another step that they just have to go through that, just to verify that. But if they ask that question, that's the answer to that. So now that we have the items set up in the system here, we're ready to go on with the next part that we covered yesterday, and that was invoicing. To start an invoice, you can either come up here and say invoice new. That's one way. We could go back to the home page and click on the little button that we have. So if I go home, depending on what home page you're on, you have retail quick cart, you have start new cart. If I knew a client name, I could type in like
There's clown.
Fred in here, clown.
Yep.
I could go find a client. Over here I have start new cart for a client. Or another way, if I use the little super back button again, go back to my PO line items. See, I just set this up and I want to invoice somebody some bookkeeping right away. I can click on bookkeeping and I can either go to the advance add to cart here, or I can say, hey, I know it was 5.5 hours I need a bill. And I can just add it to the cart. And then it's going to ask me for a location. The reason why is I haven't got that set as my default location, so it's kind of assuming that I'm going to be in Brandon's, but it wants to make sure. So now I've got bookkeeping in the cart. If I want, I can choose a client here, and now clowns are us. And now instead of saying start new cart, this defaults to assign to cart. So it's intuitive in the fact that if the system knows you have a shopping cart open and you search a client, it's kind of like, well, maybe they want to assign this client to the cart. So if I assign that, the other thing that you can do too is you can do a change. So if I didn't mean to do clowns, I can change it. And is there somebody else in here?
Yeah, I'm not sure which ones though.
Sally is in here. So now if I say, okay, assign Sally, see it just changed it up to Myrtle Realty, which is Sally. So you can change your names on your carts up here. You can also add another consultant in here. If I'm splitting this deal with Dan, I can put Dan in here and update the cart.
You can change a date. This is very important, like if you needed to go backwards. Say this was actually on the 1st of the month or whatever. You can, as soon as you change that date and hit update cart, even when you go to checkout, it'll kind of pull that date across to the next piece. It virtually kind of puts it back in time.
One thing too about the dates, you might have noticed, I just put in, like if I put in 5-1, you don't have to put in like 05/01. You don't even have to put 2013 in. It will automatically update it to 2013. You have to really be careful, because if you're dealing at, like say in January and you're adding things for December, if you just put like 12/25, it's going to do 12/25 of this year. So it's going to be a future date. So that's the only time you have to put in like 12. Yes, Santiago?
Yeah, so when you change the date, because I did this for some past merchant stuff, I had to show some invoices, and I had to change the date on there, but then I did the invoice, it still had today's date against that today's date on the invoice on the top. Is that just a settings in mind?
You may not have hit the update cart. If you don't play the game inside the cart, it's a session. So it's virtual memory. It's not even in the database. And if you don't hit that update cart, it's kind of like, hey, I didn't know you were really playing. Like,
Oh, okay.
like that update cart is a huge button.
Yeah, because when I printed the invoice out, it still had, the recent date instead of the back date that I was showing had on there. So I just thought that might be one of my settings I need to change. So.
Nope. Update cart. Make it stick. Make it stick.
The other thing I wanted to show you is I put bookkeeping in here that's under vendor name Denver Training. If I search all, just to see what other items, because we added a lot of other items in here, I think this is one of the most important things, and we talked about this a couple times yesterday, is we have two distinctions on tracking inventory. The first one is specific. It's locking it down per location. So it's saying that if you've never had this item, you can't sell it. And that's very, very beneficial when you start dealing with larger companies that have multiple locations. The second selection that you get is global, where it's like, hey, I don't really care. If the item exists in the system, you just go ahead and sell it no matter what location it exists in. And we're still, on both of those sections, it's still tracking inventory by location, sales by location, sales by salesperson. All that is still tracked. The only distinction is that if it's specific, it's just not going to let you sell that from your location unless you've had it at your location. And the way you can tell that is you can see here is Herman the horsey, and you see these three little dots under quantity here. That is the little ID that's telling you that, hey, the item exists, but your location has never had it. I am looking at this from Brandon's location, so you can see location is Brandon's area, and it's showing the dots. So if I were to try to add one of these to the cart, it's going to squawk at me and say, sorry. Well, actually, guys have it set on global.
It happened several times where it gave the error, and then we changed
I switched it to
Yeah,
global.
he's got it set to global. If it wasn't set on global, it wouldn't allow me to add this to it. Also, what I was going to show you is you can see here's bookkeeping under generic items. So I could add 3-point whatever as a generic item as well. And I just wanted to show you that you can actually have two part numbers here. And I actually added the horsey a couple times. Let me just get rid of these horsies on here. But I wanted to show you that, like this bookkeeping here, and we don't show the vendor on the invoice specifically because, if you have a company that's selling multiple items from multiple vendors, they don't really want their customer to know where they bought those items from. So you can have the same part number. So I could literally have bookkeeping in here an unlimited amount of times, but it would have to come from each vendor. So if I tried to set bookkeeping up under the same vendor, then it's going to come back and say, hey, that already exists. You have to modify it a little bit, like bookkeeping 1 or whatever. But you can have bookkeeping under as many different vendors as you want. And in the background, we're tracking that. So if this was the only invoice that I did in this entire company and I went to the income statement, it would show me category as whatever category the bookkeeping's under, which I put it under services. It would show me services, and then it would show me 2 lines for bookkeeping, and it would show me the vendor that I bought that from. So when you're looking at the income statement, you can see, oh, well, I sold this much bookkeeping from this vendor and this much bookkeeping from this vendor, as an example. So that's something that's really intuitive, I think, as far as being able to track that, to be intuitive, because you want to be able to get that information back to the owners. That's what they want to know on their on their income statement and everything. Anyway, so then we'll just go ahead and go to checkout.
I did add merchant processing last night as well. I went in and tweaked a couple little small things. Like we weren't able to do virtual merchant processing through this one, but I added that. I added a couple custom little other spots from your chooser. So I tweaked it a little bit, just little teeny tweaks.
I do want to show you guys how to post a virtual credit card payment to this. So down below here, it's already defaulted, and this is a setting here. This field can either be open or not open. If I set someone up who generally is taking cash payments all the time, on the corp-wide settings, I'll set it up as cash. which leaves this field blank and defaults the money type to cash. That way, if this field's blank and somebody's bill is $428 and you're mainly taking cash, they might pay you $450, and then you can just put $450 in, and then it's going to tell you right down here what your change back is going to be. It'll also post that on the invoice. So that's another setting on the inside. The other thing you guys can control off of the corp-wide settings is how many of these fields you want. It goes up to 5. So if a client doesn't want to see 3, you can cut it down to 2 or just 1 field if you want, or you can expand it to 5. The default is 3 because we found that a lot of people, merchants, a lot of times they'll take a check and cash, on some occasions. So it's kind of leaving that open to where they can add that. You can also, mix it between, they might say, hey, put $50 on my credit card, and here's the rest in cash. You can do that as well. To show you how to demonstrate a virtual payment, if we go to the payment page, and this is where what we reviewed yesterday is asking for the credit card. So if I right click and go to view source,
Here's a manual credit card, and then you can just change the expiration date if you want to just do a
okay,
manual one.
and I use this a lot. I copy this piece here, so Control C, and then I close this, and I do Control V, and then Tab. And if you're not carrying around a credit card, I've never had a credit card in my life, so I don't carry one around. But
What about that mag type swiper? Does that work? Is it plugged in?
The mag would swipe it. That's actually that card is an old one, so
Yeah.
it'll give us a.
It will definitely.
But if you wanted to see us actually swipe it, we can physically swipe it for you.
I'm going to change the payment to $150. So say that they told me, hey, I'll put $150 on this credit card. Okay, so I'll submit it. And then this one will return back. This one here that you're running right now actually goes out and actually goes and hits the actual merchant processor that we have set up. And it actually brings back an approval number and everything. It's all play, obviously. Now, if I want to add another payment to this, I can go back to I can just even come down here and say 150. Say he said put 150 on this other card. So this one here is a Visa as well. And
Go ahead and say create the invoice. It'll jump over. Because the CC approval number was blank on that, and it recognized that you do have merchant processing, it's like, oh, okay, looks like I still need to get some more information. I don't have enough.
And then I would swipe the card through.
Yeah.
Again, it filled it. I do a tab.
Okay, it's going to squawk because it's going to be invalid. And because it's a physical swipe, it'll be like, ah.
And so it shows the expiration date is expired.
So
that's kind of an example of how to swipe the card through.
So as soon as you enter in the Visa, and you're going to want to just hit create card, it's going to take you back here before you swipe the card, right? Because you don't want to swipe it first.
So no. It has to be part of the checkout process. Your cart is virtual memory, okay? It's just a session. As soon as you say checkout, you've left the cart mode in a virtual way. Okay, we're going to stamp this sucker. I'm putting either a real payment, or I'm going to put it on account, or I'm going to do a partial payment, okay?
Yeah.
That's when it prompts for the credit card action.
Yeah, so what he did is create in the invoice, and then the invoice popping back up to that, that credit card data entry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you'll notice too, I already ran 150 on the Visa. Like if I even go back to the cart and go, well, okay, whatever, and go to checkout again, that 150 is still held in there. It's like, wait, we already have 150 towards this. So now I could look and see down below that my remaining amount is 278. So say I did try to run this other card for a person and it was declined. Oh, well, okay, here's 300 cash. Then I could come in and say cash, say cash, and then I could create the invoice. And then now I have the payments made in full, and I owe them $21.50 on that.
And then which is cool, it shows 2 forms of payment.
Yeah, it shows both your payments, plus it has this approval number here, and I think it's really important. Believe me, we have a lot of accounts that haven't integrated their credit card processing through the system. They still use the little swiper that additionally takes paper and ink, and a lot of times a print. And then the other thing is, too, is when that machine batches out, you still have to marry that information in with Adilas, and you need to put the approval number in here, when you do it. I mean, it can be done, but it's a lot easier if you, spend $50 and buy the little bitty swiper and just they swipe the card through, and then that way we're tracking the entire process, because now all of these payments are now showing up in the payments that need to be deposited. And so, like, I don't know if you guys covered this a little bit yesterday, but if I go to the deposit homepage, well, I don't even have the function for the permission for that, but those payments are ready to be deposited.
You know, the reason why I'm asking is because I do a lot of, key in credit cards to a virtual terminal instead of swiping. Because a lot of businesses out of state. I could still link my merchant to Adilas, but I don't have to swipe it and then still key it in.
Oh, yes. Yeah, you can key it in.
Cost me more.
To key it in?
Oh, yeah.
They key
Cost
it
me
in.
1%.
But I also, take credit cards all over the United States, so
You do what you gotta do.
I have no choice.
No, that's a really good question, Santiago. The benefit is, even if you have to key it in, you still have more benefit of keying it in the actual invoice.
But it's going to save time, because then I'm not going to my virtual terminal and then transferring data from Adilas, from the merchant, so on and so forth. I could just go straight to Adilas, hit checkout, key in the credit card, create my invoice, and that's it. I'm done.
That's correct. And it's returning that approval number stamped back on the invoice. So you don't have to, if you go into Adilas and you have your terminal separated and you select Visa and this and you try to check out, it's going to say, well, what's the approval number? Then you got to read it off of that little piece of paper, put it back in the system, and there's a chance of error right there.
Yeah.
The other thing that you have is, once all of your payments are collected in Adilas and posted, then you can match up to your batch, your daily batch that you have.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a good transition to
Casey,
make.
Could you go to ADV and invoice? We're going to go to the payments. I want to show them the difference between.
Go to where?
Click on quick search, invoice, and then ADV. We're going to go to the advanced. Now scroll down to the bottom and select Visa way down on the bottom. Even further. Right there. So where it says money type, right there, say Visa. And then go down and just say search. So you can see how some of the CC approval numbers have an actual link. Some of them are just keyed in. Well, if we really swipe it, we provide an additional link. It'll basically kind of, if you click on that, it gives you more details. Here's what it did, here's the tax that it was on, here's the this, here's that. Like, we're going to give you a ton of information.
The other thing that's nice too is this void, the void button. So during the course of business, before the batch, if somebody accidentally is like, oh, I gave you the wrong credit card, I need that one back and use this one, all you got to do is just do like he said, go to the invoice, click on the approval number, void that transaction.
You could void it right through Adilas, so you don't even have to go down.
You can, as long as it's during the course of the business.
It
If it's the next day,
Obviously, yeah.
then it won't allow you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the swiper's just USB to whatever terminal.
Yeah.
That all is, and then you just have it in a setting.
So what we do is we take it and we throw it out to the gateway, but we can swipe and catch that data because it's just the magnetic reader. It literally, I could go to WordPad or Microsoft Word and I could swipe a card and it does the exact same thing. So what we do is that's what it does? Okay, let's mimic that inside of Adilas. So we don't do any really special things other than let it swipe, catch it, and then do what's called parsing it, which is kind of like grab this and this and this and this means this, stick it in the right fields. That's what we do, basically.
Except for the secure stuff that you can't get.
Okay, correct. And so we send that off to the gateway, and the gateway deals with all the security stuff. Like, we're PCI compliant through that way because it gets into all kinds of crazy stuff when you start talking merchants.